Good evening. I call this meeting to order. It is Monday, September 19th, 2022, and this is the meeting of the Milton Warrant Committee. In attendance tonight, we have Emily Cavalier, Jorge Asare, J.J. O'Connor, Stephen Geister, Lorraine D., Thomas Caldwell, Lori Connolly, Allison Gagnon, Amanda Serio, Judith Steele, and Jay Fundley. Miss anybody? Nope. Great. Thank you all for coming. On our agenda tonight, find it. We're going to have a presentation by the School Building Committee. So I'd like to recognize Mr. Sean Rourke. I'd like to make a note for our meeting tonight. This is the presentation that we're going to have the School Building Committee. I've asked the committee to come give us a presentation. Tonight is not the vote. We are definitely not voting on this tonight. The purpose of this, given the fact that we have a new warrant committee, we've had a lot of turnover since the last time we met. The purpose of this is to educate us all on the project. It's my understanding that there have been some developments with regards to the project since the last time this was discussed, at least here. It's important for us to know that. And then I would anticipate that we would have at least one more meeting going into the special prior to a formal meeting. So, we could have a total of two, the second one being the vote, if time allows, in order for there to be a full-body discussion with all the relative stakeholders to be heard. But tonight, the floor is yours, sir.
Perfect. Thank you. My name's Sean O'Rourke. I'm a School Building Committee Chair. I'm also a town meeting member of Precinct 8. With me tonight is Mike Zulis, who's also a member of our committee and of the Select Board, and just give you a presentation. As Dave, as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, sorry, getting used to the formalities. I'd like to keep it just informational, open. So if you have questions as you're going through, feel free to chime in. Don't wait till the end. Because it's not a true formal presentation for all that stuff, there's a lot of information there, and just start walking through it. So the first part is what our committee is formed of. We're made of 9 members, so while I do a lot of the talking and a lot of the presentations, there's 8 other people who are doing a lot of the work. Most recently, Selena Miranda of the school committee has replaced Ada Rosemarin because Ada has become chair of the school committee. So our committee is made up of the top 5, which are appointed by the town moderator. The bottom 2 on the left, Ben and Selena, are appointed by the school committee. And Mike Zulis and Glenn Hoffman are appointed by the select board. I'm going to take a minute on this slide, which is essentially the timeline of our entire committee. We were formed in 2019. The basis of the formation of our committee was precipitated by a school committee subcommittee, a facility subcommittee, that did a number of studies looking at the addition, expansion of the existing school buildings. So they hired DRA Architecture. DRA Architecture provided a number of options that were there, and based on that, that's what was the genesis of starting our committee. As we started as that committee, we took all that information and pressure tested it. We didn't just accept it and say, yeah, we're building a school and go. So along this path that you're seeing there, the kind of gap between that one and the next flag of a land study, we were pressure testing all the data that was given to us. As we did that, we realized we need to find land, we need to build a school. So what we did is at the end of that year, started really doing a deep dive into available land around the town. and looking at that. Following that, we issued an RFP. You know, generically, we were hoping it would be the easiest way of doing it. You know, put something out there, hopefully somebody comes back, says, we'll sell you land, and then we could go with that, it would make it easy. We got 0 responses. So it turned our direction back. We started studying land more around the town, diving in with the town planners, really studying what we had for land. I took over at the end of 2020, at the beginning of 2021, I took over as chair of the school committee, school building committee. At the town meeting at that time, I realized, you know, we need to start making some strides, and I announced our goal is to find land. So that was kind of our direction at that point. We followed that winter into the summer and really started honing down. And in August of last year, we announced Gow Road was the preferred property that we wanted to construct a new school. Right after that, for the, you know, essentially right through the fall and the winter, we engaged in a number of public engagement events, whether it was face-to-face coffee with people, Zoom meetings through webinars of 50 to 60 people, multiple of them, essentially what you'll see in coming slides. The site selection process that we did, as I said, you know, we looked through a number of slides, a number of parcels within the town. From the town, we were given a roster of 107 parcels, 77 of which were below 4 acres, so they're kind of unusable to build a school, so we filtered that out pretty quickly. The remaining 30 parcels that were there, the breakdown of those 30 are 5 were school parcels, 4 were park parcels, 11 are conservation or wetlands parcels, and the remaining 10 were town parcels that already had infrastructure on them. We did look at private sites. We talked to the Archdiocese. Our first one out of the gates was St. Mary's of the Hills. That did not provide, there was no interest from them. The memory care facility that's going in at the Highland Street site for the hospital, we did talk to the hospital. We tried to get that. They were not interested. We talked to St. Pius. The site there was too small. We looked at where there's a 40B going in right now along the access road, the horse farm, that got sold. So we did do a lot of study, not just public land, but private land also. The list that we were given to the town, this is basically it. It's, you know, we published this multiple times. The 2 highlighted in yellow are 2 of the parcels that we'll talk about tonight as part of the swap. So as I mentioned, the Gow Road property was the one we identified. The key thing to keep in mind here is the parcel is broken up on 2 sides. There's the hockey stick portion, which is on one side of Gow Road, which you're not touching, and then the yellow portion, which is on the, I think it's southern side of Gow Road, that abuts Home Inc. That is the portion of the parcel that we're looking at. So as I mentioned, these are the public meetings that we did. It was exhaustive. It was essentially a gauntlet, as I put it, you know, through last year that I did. On top of these public meetings were town meetings that we did with the Warrant Committee, about 3 of them, with the Conservation Commission, about 3 of them, Parks Commissioners, School Committee, you know what I mean? So there was a number of meetings and a number of opportunities for people to understand this.
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Sure.
You guys said you hired an architect in 2019. Did they review the schools to see if there was any possibility of building off of the schools?
Correct. We did not hire the architect. The school committee has a subcommittee called the Facilities Subcommittee. They hired DRA Architecture. DRA Architecture is the firm that actually built all the schools back when they did the big school project.
Are they still in?
Yep. We're working kind of conceptually on a few things. So what they did is there's a full study that was done. We can share it with you guys so you can digest it.
Sure.
But it did look at a number of options, adding on to schools, putting, building on to different things there, stuff like that. The problem with all those things is it didn't address the overall problem of the number of classrooms that were needed. So you get a couple here and a couple here, but it wouldn't, the summation of all of them wouldn't add up to the total number that we needed. Good.
Can I ask a question, actually?
Yeah.
We were talking about the 107 parcels of land that the town shared. Are those just saying these are 107 parcels that we have, or that are viable, or here's what's here's the list, take a look.
It was basically every available parcel of land, essentially town-owned land that was there. As you can imagine, in the town, there's not much above 4 acres that are there. And as we'll talk about later, that 4 acres soon became 6 once we engaged architects on there. So that list even got smaller as we were going down there. But rather than trying to run through 107 of them, we did look at some to see some of the smaller parcels, if they adjoin. Like if you have a 2-acre site and a 3-acre site next to each other, could you put them together and make a 5-acre site? We did that, but none of them really fell to that. So the graph that you see here is one for historical grade enrollment across the whole district, pre-K to high school. The right side of the graph in purple or pink, depending on what color you see, shows the projections. So the district utilizes a company or a company called NESDEC, and what they do is they look at enrollment projections for the town. Part of the pressure testing we did initially as a committee was take those previous enrollment datas that were there and extrapolate them out. Like we have ones going back from 2007, 2008 that give enrollment projections to 2022, right? So we took the actual data of the enrollment now, compared it to the previous extrapolation that they did back then, and saw it didn't work. You know what I mean? They're very conservative when they're there. They don't want to say it's going to grow like this because, it would just be too jarring. The things they don't take into account are future construction projects. Unless they're permitted, they don't take them into account on there. The other way they use it too is, we had NESDEC come into us. We had them sit at a table with us and explain everything, how they go about it. It wasn't just us diving in and making assumptions. They use essentially birth rate plus some scalar for it. So what they do is look at birth rates in the town. They say this many kids were born now, 5 to 6 years later they'll be entering kindergarten, skewed a little bit for a percentage, and then that's how they would do the projections. They can't predict real estate transactions. So once you take these graphs and overlay real estate transactions in the town, right, you see spikes in real estate. The next year, kindergarten, first grade, spike up. Once those spikes occur in the grade enrollments, they don't go away. It's a wave. It goes all the way through, and that's what you're seeing here. So anybody that knows real estate in the town, elderly people and people that have kids that have moved on to college and stuff like that are cashing in and moving away or downsizing and selling their homes. I drive down the street to, my daughter goes to Collycott. She just started this year for kindergarten. The number of kids in this town is astronomical. I mean, you just see it, even during the pandemic, kids riding their bikes and everything like this. It blows my mind of how much we have.
Can I ask a clarifying question here? I'm sure there'll be others on this. This is the same problem we've had every time we've seen these projections, as I say, and the question is, how do you forecast when, by my small look at this graph predicts a dramatic change in the way in which the town's population is behaving in the next 10 years, which many of us may say is not likely. But how are you forecasting based on this, which I think looks like a very strange graph and does not use past performance to predict future performance? Or are you forecasting your own projection? So so it boils down to, is the current school committee plan for this building to cover this or to cover what we think might actually be the future?
Yeah, so go way back to my start on this committee, right? So when I moved to this town 4 years ago, I went to my daughter's enrollment, and the school committee got up and gave a thing on the schools and how they're overcrowded. My first question was, you guys just built the schools. How do you not right size them? So I'm in design and construction. I'm an engineer. Anytime I try to build something, you try to future-proof it because you have to have expansion on it. We build the airports, and we build the airports with what we call shadow space because there's going to be expansions to them later in the future. So that was my next question is okay, so you didn't build shadow space this time. You're talking about a new school. Are you building that school or constructing in such a way that it can be expanded in the future if you need to, just in case? And that was just too deep of a question for them at the time, so they couldn't answer it. And that's what propelled me of I need to jump on this committee to do this work, especially because how much it's going to cost. I manage very large scale construction projects, and I was like, I can do this. You know what I mean? So to answer your question is, depending on, it's a complex question, depending on how we go. If we go with MSBA and we go along their guidelines, they prescribe us exactly what the enrollment's gonna be. So we have to build to that. If we go without MSBA, which is, a future discussion, we can build essentially what we want. But the grade configurations we've come up with as a committee, we think address all the grade levels, that we're gonna have enough breathing room that, depending on how things vary over time, we'll be able to address that.
Okay.
I have a question. How does this data project trends with people homeschooling and private schooling? Because you said you take the birth rate, but how does that, as the trends continue for private and homeschool, how does that affect this?
For NESDEC, we never asked them that, so I really can't answer it.
Okay.
But essentially, as an overall population, I think in general, just from my personal experience and knowing people in the town, as you hit the middle school and the high school, that's where you see transitions to private school. Homeschooling and stuff like that, I think would be a much smaller percentage of the population
Yeah.
for that. I mean, the yellow line that I drew in there, I tried to draw in. So right now, the elementary schools that we have about 2,300 kids in them. It's built for 1,900. So we have to lose about 400 kids. So when people look at this graph and they're talking about the school, it's not for projections of kids that are gonna move here in 10 years or anything like that. They're already here. And what I tried to do with the yellow line is show kind of what that differential is. That graph would have to come down below that yellow line, theoretically, for elementary school to get us back to where we need to be. So I don't think you'd see
Yeah.
that many students go out, private, homeschooling and
Or
stuff like that.
yeah.
in there.
The question is that for the land swap for the school, has there been a determination of what the building would be for? Elementary, middle school?
Yep.
Okay,
And I'll get to that.
okay, awesome, thank you.
Yes, sir.
The 11/21 date, is that the last data point you got in from NESDEC?
No, we got a projection from them last year.
Okay.
We just didn't update the graph on that.
And that's what those numbers are on the top?
Yeah, from that projection that we had there.
Okay.
So,
And so you also said then that I know, I think we all know there are a number of potential really large-scale projects coming in, buildings coming into Milton. I can't remember how many hundreds of units there are.
Little over, so the 40B projects that are coming in, I ping Tim about it all the time. Tim Zawinski's the town planner. Roughly about 700 units are planned or on the horizon, half of which are gonna be 2- and 3-bedroom units. So in NESDEC, when a permit gets pulled, NESDEC looks at the permit or the project and looks at how many 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom units. A 3-bedroom unit's the attrition more children to it, because there's most likely gonna be more kids there. A 2-bedroom unit, they'll attribute maybe 1 to 1.1, and a 1-bedroom unit, they don't. So when I look at those numbers of 700 units, half of them 2 or 3 bedrooms, that's 350 kids. You know what I mean?
So are those, depending on what status those projects are in, they
Correct.
cannot,
They're not in there.
they're not in there.
They're not in there. Yep. So everything you're seeing there is void of any potential 40B projects because they haven't been permitted. There are some of the 40Bs, and we'll touch on that a little later in the presentation, that are starting to get executed now. And then as NESDEC does their numbers on that, and they have those permits, they'll update these.
Thanks.
Sorry, so
Yes, sir.
that brings us back to the original question. Is this going to be future-proofed? Is this for our current population, or?
Again, it's a difficult question because it depends on if we're going with MSBA.
I don't
MSBA,
know what that means.
the Mass School Building Authority is the authority that we apply to get funding, or a portion of our funding to build the school. If you take their funding, you have to play by their rules. And essentially what their rules say is, they tell you what the enrollments are. And then based on those enrollment numbers they give you, they say you have this much square footage to build out, to apply that. So depending on how they see our enrollment, they might not future-proof it, because typically they're limited budgets. So they're gonna do a study, they're gonna redo what NESDEC does, come up to a projection that they're gonna do, and then we're gonna build to that. Now, keep in mind, in 2008, when we built the schools, we did that exact same thing, and it didn't work. So that's.
So they were behind it when we built all the new schools and
Yeah.
moved the high school, and
Correct. Yep, and then you got
we got like 80% of it.
Yes, sir, and that will not be,
Same.
happening again.
Do we have any idea what it would be?
They don't publish it, so I'm working on it through some friends, but as of right now, I don't have anything that can tell us. My guess is it's gonna be significantly lower.
I think we're on the same line here about asking for money from outside of the town. So significantly lower or none? Because,
It wouldn't be none. So if we get accepted with MSBA, there would be some portion of the funding there, but it would not be anywhere near the 80 to 90% that we got a long time ago.
would that percentage that the town received a long time ago impact the amount of money that the town will get now, because we got so much before? And now, well, you kind of, eating a little too much at the
Yeah,
buffet,
yeah.
so
I-
maybe.
You're leading into a very good answer. The answer is the equation that they use to develop the reimbursement rate, it takes in a number of social economical factors, right? So it's not just, we got a ton of money before and they're gonna give us a little bit there, a portion. But my guess is, the optics of what we got before is working against us on getting selected right now. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So, once we get selected, there's a formula that they use, that they have, and based on that formula, it tells us how much our reimbursement's gonna be. My understanding of the previous project, there was certain legislation that was passed that allowed us to qualify for a higher reimbursement rate, which we don't qualify for now, so our number is gonna be a lot smaller.
Does the lack of 40B, not meeting our 10% or whatever we're supposed to, is that impacted at all?
I don't know. I really don't know all that goes in there. All I've been told is there's social economical
Yeah, yeah.
factors, and it's, that's such a generic thing that I don't know the exact ins and outs.
Okay.
So it could end up being that, in reality, the town could receive such a low percentage of money from outside the town that the entire burden practically falls on the town.
Potentially. Yep. But one other, yeah.
I was just going to say, just to add, we have applied the previous 2 years and not been selected. So
Okay.
we've already been trying to see if we can get the money for this, and we haven't been selected. The first year, we made the first cut. Last year, I don't think we made the cut, so we've applied for a third year now to see if,
Correct.
we will be eligible for the funding. But for the first 2 tries, we didn't make the cut.
So the one,
And
the
for the
one,
record, I just like the record to reflect that the speaker was Mr. Mike.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, apologize.
Okay.
so one of the things to keep in mind, the topic we're here to talk about tonight for the land
Is
swap.
the land.
Correct. The land swap, one of the things that came up at last town meeting was, we didn't want to mix in the cost of constructing the school with the land swap right now. And what we did is, on the last time we did the land swap, we put a reverter clause in there. Meaning, well, if the land swap gets passed and a certain amount of time goes by, I think it was like 10 years, and there's no funding for a school.
That's a very long time.
Takes a long time to build a school too. So, but what it was, within that time frame, if it's not funded, everything reverts back to what it is today. So,
If it's not funded, if it's not funded in any way, either a combination of this MSBA and the town,
correct.
or all, or
Yeah, funded as far as.
just
like-
one or
yeah,
the
we-
other, however
Yep,
that mix happens.
yep.
If total funding for the school, then,
Everything would revert back.
so this land would remain in limbo,
Nope.
if you were to kind of think of it that way.
Nope. Essentially, what would happen is, at that 10-year mark, and I don't remember the exact thing, and when we draft the article for this, we'll have all that ironed out. But essentially, at the end of that period that's there, if there's no funding, the conservation land that we're gonna swap, or it's swapped, goes back to conservation land. Everything goes back. We redo everything.
So, but the land itself, because you're not building, because you're waiting for funding, so 10 years goes by and nothing's cooking.
Everything
That
goes
land
back.
is just sitting there.
Yeah.
waiting for some kind of a decision
Yeah,
on
I
what its
would be very-
future
I
is.
would be very interested to see if that happens. I mean, with, if I can proceed with the presentation, just kind of
Oh,
show
I'm
you.
so
what-
sorry.
No, it's totally fine. But yeah, there's, just to give you an idea of other things. Yeah, Jay.
I'm sorry, can we go back to
Yep.
what we were talking about earlier, which is this future-proof? So we've applied twice for SBA funding, we haven't gotten it. Said if we get it, our hands are tied as to how big we can make it.
Correct.
If we don't get it, and we make this future-proof, because one thing that's on my mind is the MBTA zoning,
Mm-hmm.
which that's to be determined exactly how that's gonna flush out, but, you know, let's just imagine that adds another 1,000 units that are family-friendly. Not overnight, but over time. Are we future-proof? I mean, we can't be future-proof for everything.
No, I agree. I mean, nobody has a crystal ball to kind of build those things out. What we are doing with this project is we're addressing enrollment or space enrollment at all levels. So when I get to the slide showing what the grade enrollments are, we're addressing it at the high school, we're addressing it at the middle school, we're addressing it at the elementary school, all with one singular project. So I think that, you know, financially, that's the best thing to do right now. I mean, I'm not on one to say, let's go build 5 new schools and hope that, you know, the transportation infrastructure bill goes, the transportation development bill goes through, and we have to do all that. We'll have to adjust to that as a town, you know, as that stuff starts coming around. What I'm trying to do is address what we're experiencing today.
Okay.
You know, the stuff that's going on in the schools today, we'll get into that a little bit further in the slides, but it's, for those that are aware, there's a lot of stuff going on within the schools right now that's affecting children, so.
And just to add very quickly, Mike Zulis again from the School Building Committee. In the determinations that the School Committee, Facilities Committee, Subcommittee made, and that the School Building Committee made separately, in reviewing the different options, do we build a building? Do we try to add on to the existing schools? The determination that they made and then that we separately made after about 9 months was doing those other things, trying to add on to the other buildings, wouldn't solve the problem. So you'd end up spending $30 to $40 million and you wouldn't solve the problem of that gap for the 400 students and then beyond that. So that was the determination. So that's why, I mean, Sean has suggested that it's difficult to determine whether this is future, which I think it is. But I think what's important is that these two bodies who looked at it determined if you do those other things, you don't even get to square one, right?
Okay.
Regardless of whether you can future-proof.
So the next slide I have up here, it was telling to me, you know, as I started looking through census data that, you know, was published, you know, from 1980 to 2010, you know, over 30 years, the town only grew by 1,143 people. The last 10 years, a third of the time, we've gone up by over 1,600. You know what I mean? So the town is becoming increasingly dense very quickly. And that's kind of, you know, the numbers that we're seeing, the enrollment is kind of reflective in the census data. So this is what our grade proposals are here. We got the school committee to vote on this last March, and this was a big step for them because this overhauled the entire school system. So what we're doing is we're constructing a new upper middle school, what we call McGow Road campus, next to the high school. That school housed 7th and 8th grade, along with preschool. So what it does is it creates a preschool location that's next to the high school. The high school students used to have a program where they would go down and teach the children, and we can introduce that back with this program here. The Pierce Middle School, which currently houses 3 grade levels, is now only going to house 2 grade levels, right? So we strip a grade out of there. At the elementary school, we're stripping the 5th grade out, and we're stripping the preschool out, again, freeing up space. The key with that is we're not redistricting. You know, if we were to, our previous intent was to build a new elementary school and make a 5th, and it was going to, you know, you have to redistrict everything. It was going to be, and it wouldn't solve the middle school. So this was a big push of our committee, and this is kind of where we pressure tested the stuff that was studied before and presented by the architects. They said, yeah, build a new elementary school. We took it, studied it more, and came up with this, and, you know, presented it to the school committee to say, we want you to look at this, we think this is a better option, you know, and it took a while to get them to come around to it, essentially because it introduced an additional transition. My take on it is, while it introduces another transition, that transition from the upper middle school to the high school is much smaller because you're on the same campus. And that's where the land on the SIP part of the equation, we got two different things we're doing, school configurations and land. Having the land at the high school with this configuration just makes everything work perfectly.
I'm sorry, I have a question. So when we talk about the schools and when we talk about the data, you said that the highest number of enrollment was in the elementary schools.
Correct.
And most of the numbers change due to private after 6th, 7th, 8th grade. So the school option is to build a school for the 7th and 8th graders where you have more kids going to private. And
Well, what's happened with the previous one that was there, it didn't address the middle school. And what happens is the middle school right now is probably the most packed of any of the schools, right? We just got the numbers. I forget exactly what they are, but we can send them over so you
sure,
can
yeah,
see
I'd
them.
love to see them.
Yeah, but essentially, you talk to any parent that's there, even though you have a small attrition rate of kids going off to private school, the middle school's way overcrowded. The video that we're gonna play for you actually shows the lunch that's there, and the crunch of these kids going in and out of there. I think they actually had to introduce an additional lunch period up there, just to handle the kids. So one of the unique things that came up with like going through the schools is realizing how they push and pull the kids around school through the day. The cafeteria is being the big thing. When people talk about build onto the schools, you know, build more classrooms and stuff like that, you still have to push and pull all those kids through a singular cafeteria, right? So theoretically, you could build 100 more classrooms on every school. You only got one cafeteria. So what that does now is take the lunch periods and spread them out. So now you get kids eating lunch at 10 in the morning rather than, 11 when they should be. So there's limiting factors, not just space-wise in the buildings, but to build onto them. Yes, theoretically it works and you could do it, but there's limiting factors there. I'm an electrical engineer. We do mechanical, electrical, plumbing. That's basically the group I manage. HVAC systems. Once you start adding more kids in there, you have to bump up the HVAC because you introduce more heat load from bodies. Plumbing fixtures, you know what I mean? You put more people in these spaces, you have to put more bathrooms in there by code. These are all the things where it's easy to look at and just say, build onto it, do that, and these are all the derivatives that come out of it.
Can we see the prior slide?
Yes.
I think what my colleague was asking about was the elementary school, and if we could see the prior slide, the page up, or whatever.
There we go.
So elementary school would only be going to 4th instead of 5th.
Correct.
Which I think that's the plan for relief, even though we're crowding at the elementary school, is just take an entire grade out.
Yeah, 2 grades. Preschool and 5th grade. So it
Preschool, which don't count.
what happens with the preschool classrooms, so preschool and kindergarten classroom physically are larger classrooms than what grade level classrooms are, 1 through 5th, right? So preschool and kindergarten classrooms are roughly 1,200 square feet. They have a dedicated bathroom because those kids can't share bathrooms with the other ones. And what you'll see on some of the stuff, or some of the conversions that have gone on right now, they've had to take other classrooms next to bathrooms to make them kindergartens, close off those bathrooms to general people when they have to use the bathroom, and allow those kids just to go there because they don't have a dedicated bathroom in the classes for these kids. So, when we strip out the preschool portion that's there, it actually frees up more room because it frees up a 1,200 square foot classroom there that can be used, later on. Sorry.
Thank you. Oh, no,
Yeah.
I was curious with moving the pre-K to this new proposed middle school, does that also increase potential for enrollment in the pre-K programs? Because I'll say I have a kid in full day pre-K and it felt like winning I know they had a lottery, but it really did feel like I called my whole family because there are so few spots that I was astounded when I realized how low the capacity was.
Yeah, that's beyond us right now. So for us, for scheduling, we're doing physical space. Once the spaces are there, the school committee will start deciding, is portions of it full day? Are they doing 2 half days like my daughter was in and stuff like that? Those, I don't know. For me right now, I'm just focusing on space and land for that stuff.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, so as I was touching upon, classroom convergence. If you get to tour the facilities, the Cunningham Library, Cunningham Collycott Library, it's a shared library. I would welcome you to go in there and look at how dense and how much space has been carved out. So what you see in the bottom left-hand space there, image 2, that's a classroom that they basically put partition walls up for anyone that worked in an office before. That's a cube. So you have students learning in that space, and you'll see it in the video. I point out all the time there's no acoustical separation. So you have a classroom where noise is going out into the library, and noise from the library is going into the room, distracting these kids. And at second grade, it's kind of a critical learning phase that these kids are being subjected to, what's not a good classroom. The other part that I want you to focus on this too is you'll probably get published data on what class sizes are right now, all right? So for example, that's a second grade classroom. If there are 5 strand levels of second grade that's there, and 4 of them in regular classrooms are at 25 students, and this one's at 24, you have to numerically redisperse that classroom back into the other classrooms to get a true understanding of what those grade sizes are. So when you do that, and you take these 24 kids and resprinkle them numerically back there, the true class size isn't 25, it's 31. Now, those are just theoretical numbers, but as you study this stuff, or if you get the data and request it, you really have to know, are those students sitting in a converted classroom? And if they are, you have to take that number and repopulate it across to get true numbers. The district right now has done, you've got principals acting as architects and space planners right now, carving up spaces like this and throughout all the schools just to address this. So our overcrowding video, let me see if I can transition this.
Well, it's interesting because, you guys are here to film the pinch, right?
One of the biggest challenges I see is the overcrowding. In an ideal situation, particularly at your elementary levels, you would like to keep class sizes no more than 18 to allow for our teachers to give individualized attention.
You can definitely see that there are spaces that are smaller, there are spaces that are gone. So if you want examples, if you think of the library, we have a classroom of second graders, which also happens to be a second grade classroom in a space in the corner of the library where there used to be extra shelving for books.
Art room and the music room, allowing for some space to sing, really was just too small. So as you'll see, we've actually now converted our gym. We've split it down the middle with a curtain, and half of the gym is being used for music 3 days a week, and the other 3 days a week is being used for
Up in our library, what had been our makerspace, which is a big space of our library, is now being used as a digital classroom for our Fuse and technology classes, which we on one hand have been fortunate to have a little bit of space to create another classroom, but that kind of came with the loss of the makerspace too.
So our music room we were able to preserve it up until this year, but this year we had to transform our stage in the cafeteria into a music room. We had to take all of the instruments that are usually stored and on display for children to access, and we had to put them in a closet.
And that does create a bottleneck. That does take up time, which means the teachers leave earlier to make sure that they have enough time to eat, which cuts away from more academic time. And there's sort of no way around it because you're cutting something and you want to make sure once they get in the cafeteria, those lines, they have enough time to actually eat before they go to recess. So you can't fault the teacher for leaving earlier to get them in there because all of that takes more time because more classrooms and more students are going into those spaces.
We often hear from students and families that some of the most stressful times of the day was lunchtime. The students have about 20 minutes to find their way, find a seat, get their lunch, eat it, in what was a borderline sort of hysterical environment where you
Choreographed their day in such a way that we are sort of smoothly moving a lot of children through very cramped and tight spaces.
As far as our teachers, it's cramping their space.
It's very difficult to break up into small groups when you have 28, 29 students in the class.
We've given up a lot to provide great services for our children, so it feels great to be able to do that. What we sacrifice is quality of planning time and locations for our staff, the opportunity to find a quiet place for planning. Planning with colleagues is sometimes not so easy. It's not easy to find that space, but we're working together, we're figuring it out. We're very grateful to be in beautiful buildings, but if I'm being honest, I have teachers sometimes taking meetings from their car.
And when you look at the current enrollments in the 4th and 5th grade now that are nearing 400, ballooning the size of teams to 125, 130, 140, your class sizes are going to be enormous. You're going to be talking about 28 to 30 students in most on-team classes. So math, imagine classrooms of math and English and science and social studies with pushing 30 students in there.
We are continuing to grow, like just as a point of note, when I started at Tucker, I believe we were at 350 students, and we're about 470. And that's just within, our 8 or 9 year time span. So we've grown, pretty dramatically, and I don't think people realize that.
Have an issue that we have to confront in terms of our enrollment, and the status quo of both from school building, physical plan, as well as personnel and programming, are going to have to evolve with our enrollments and with the complexities that come with that, if we're going to be able to continue to offer our kids and families the same high quality education that students have enjoyed.
So I apologize about the choppiness. If you look at the regular
wanna
video,
use
it's
your
not that
paper?
choppy when it
Download
appears
it.
up there. Stop this, jump to our next slide. So the next steps that's coming, modular classrooms. School committee at their last meeting already started talking about this. So I would fully anticipate over the next couple months, as a town, you're gonna start hearing more about modular classrooms or trailers to house students. Costs for those are not gonna be cheap either. It's just something to be aware of. The longer we wait to do this project of a new building or a new school, it is getting more expensive.
So the modular classes are to capture basically overflow.
Yeah, so the facilities subcommittee, again, has been running with that. I'm starting to get a little bit involved in it there, just to help out as best I can. But I don't know who's going in them or anything. I was on the school committee meeting at the last one, giving a presentation on some of the stuff we're about to jump into now. And that was talked about as the update from the facilities subcommittee. So I just wanted to kind of make everybody else aware that they're out there and they're coming.
Because the last time we saw these was when the schools were being built. Like this was at Glover 15 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it would be.
For my time.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what they were, that's what they were in for a few years while it was being built, so.
Yep.
I just thought it was a construction, like pushing kids over during construction, but apparently it's
Yeah,
stopgap.
It's totally separate than what our project is. So for
Okay.
example, the modular trailers that are there wouldn't be there to facilitate our project. They're going on their own path.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
I apologize about the color on these. The PowerPoint presentation didn't have it as thing, but what I want to talk about now is the Article 97 land swap. So the Article 97 land swap that we're going to talk about on the parcel that was there before on Gow Road, as we identified that parcel, as we started looking into it, we come to note that there was a previous land swap that occurred on these very same parcels in 2001. So for us, it essentially set a precedent that this has been done before, the town has voted on it, and it's been executed. So for me, graphically, to show people, I went to Google Earth. The good thing with Google Earth is they have historical satellite imagery. You can go to 2001 and you can look. Gow Road was not constructed then. There was a wooded lot. There was no connection down to Blue Hills Parkway. What you do see there is kind of the overlay in gray of what the current road looks like. But if you change the upper left-hand portion, which allows you to scroll through that satellite imagery, you can see in 2003 that road was constructed as part of the school project, which is under construction that you see up there. So for us as a committee, the process of converting conservation land and swapping it out on these parcels has already been done. So that was our precedent that we looked at and said, let's keep going.
And that was just for the road?
Just for the road.
Excuse me, just for the road.
Correct.
If I could just ask, and
Sure.
didn't realize the road went in, even though I can walk the parkway a lot. What prompted you to want that road? Traffic flow for?
That's not me. That was in 2000.
Would you?
That was the previous school project. So that is not us.
Well, I guess I meant, if I use the word you, then it would mean you, the town, if I could use that. Mike, you've been around? 21?
That's before my time.
21? That was last year.
No,
2001.
2001. That was exactly 21 years ago. First grandchild, 2001. I got a beat on that number.
Yeah.
21 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, well, I was probably asleep. I'm trying to get some sleep with a new baby. Not mine, just kind of.
I have a question about that.
Yes, sir.
And we may not know the answer, but there's land swaps and there's land swaps. I get that the town swapped that out. Was that, do we know, presented to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Office of Environmental Affairs for determination that it was a valid Article 97 land swap? And if we don't know the answer, we don't know the answer. But I mean, there's land swaps and there's land swaps. Did that go up to the state?
From my end, I couldn't answer that. I
How-
don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
How would we find that? Dave, and Sean, and Mike, how would we find that? Because that I find a very interesting question. So, we have a short space of time between the proposed special town meeting on December 5th. And how do we find that? Who would know? Where in the town would we could FOIA it, I'm sure, as a
I
citizen.
have a question about,
But just for the school building committee,
Yeah.
that's beyond the scope of what we're charged with.
Okay, Mike,
Yeah.
as a select board member, where would I find that information? Because you know you're going to get a little question from me in your little inbox tomorrow.
My guess is we can find that.
Right, and I don't want to get
Council.
bogged down on
Yeah.
that, and it might be beyond the scope of this presentation here tonight, which is a sort of a point of information for myself. So thank you for that.
And I'm sure we can find that. I'm sure town council, probably town council has the records on that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when it was done, there was surveys done, the surveys weren't recorded, and that's what kind of let us down to find some of this stuff. It was voted on by town meeting, it was approved by town meeting. Where it went from there, I don't know, but that essentially wasn't something that was done rogue.
Well, I would imagine not, but it would be very interesting to review those documents, to compare them to perhaps what you are somewhat implying that it's been done before, we can do it again. So we would like to perhaps see how you did it,
Sure.
not you personally.
Understood. Say in the town.
Yes, how it was done before, so we can compare. Comparisons are good.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, so this next slide is basically talking about site evaluation. So in the land swap, as it came up, one of the main things that is talked about for the land that we're taking out of conservation and the land that we're converting into conservation, essentially swapping, is valuation of that land. So the two parcels that were into the land swap were two that were located on Herrick Drive. The two parcels that are there are shown in yellow and blue. They abut an additional conservation parcel that's shown in green. So by converting the yellow and blue to conservation land, you unify one big lot of conservation land there. Are the lots shown in blue and yellow wet? Yes. Are they buildable? Yes. Would it cost additional money beyond a perfectly dry spot to build on there? Yes. But potentially, a developer, once the land is worth enough money, could develop land on there. The second parcel, which is the larger of the two, is located essentially across the street from the carriage house. It's essentially one large parcel that's subdivided. It's bookended. The middle portion is what we'd be swapping into conservation. It's approximately 6 acres, and it's abutted on both sides, again, by conservation land. So by converting that to conservation land, you're now unifying a large 23-acre swath of land into conservation. Now, people talk about whether that's buildable or not. There's a 40B project right across the street that would be doing the exact same thing. So on the previous slide, I'll see if I can get back to that. Yep. The wetland, you can kind of see the brook or a small stream that runs along here, along Randolph Ave. That's the only component of essentially wetlands that are there. You're allowed to cross wetlands to get to a buildable portion of the site.
Is that where they just put the sewer in, the sewer lines in there?
No, the sewer lines, I think, are further up Randolph Ave.
Yeah, near Milton Academy.
Yep.
Okay, so it's further down.
Yeah, this one that I was looking at, and again, I'll do my best to navigate, I apologize. This one, like I said, is the access road is right here. I think the Carriage House School is right here. So it's a little bit further down. 7-Eleven is a little bit further up. But essentially, what we looked at again for precedent there, I think it's raining up.
Down far. We needed it.
Yeah. So the precedent for that site, when we say it's buildable, is what we're using right across the street on 7-Eleven Randolph Ave. Right next, you can see the DPW yard on the right. What they did there is build a driveway across wetlands to get to the buildable portions of the site behind there. So the parcel that we're talking about on Randolph Ave, the Conservation Commission agrees, except for one member, that it is buildable from a 6-1 vote when we looked at it. So the mechanism by how they would access the road to build on it is exactly this. Build a small driveway across, and then essentially everything you see there in red could be developed. So one of the things I pointed out, this view I actually liked a lot. Once you unify that parcel with adjoining conservation land there, it all abuts Blue Hills. So, you know what I mean? You potentially could have a big 40B development shown in red that's there, but by converting this land, you're now preserving that right into the Blue Hills.
So can I ask a question about, that's where I keep getting confused.
Sure.
So people are asking whether or not it's buildable, but we're talking about converting it to conservation land, which by converting it, we don't want it buildable.
Right.
So what's the argument of whether or not it's buildable? Is it the value?
Yeah, so it gets into that. So what happens is right now, that is a municipally owned parcel. So essentially, if you wanted to build on it, the town could sell it off, somebody could go off and build on it, build a driveway and put up whatever they wanted, a skyscraper. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's when I talk about the buildable portion of it. When we talk valuation, it's gonna be funny, because you gotta pay attention to the valuation. So some people will talk about valuation as money-wise, that you've heard last year. These parcels are worth a lot of money. If they're worth a lot of money, ecologically valuable, they're not, because you know, if it's ecologically valuable, it's not worth a lot of money because you can't build on it because of that. So they're inversely proportional to each other. And you gotta be careful when people are arguing their points on there, because they use both sides. Whatever fits their argument, they'll weigh it both ways that way. So that's one of the portions I want to talk about, you know, valuation of land when we look at it. Yes?
Sorry, I have so many
No,
questions.
go for it. The whole point of this is to ask questions. It's very.
I like that you are allowing us not to wait to the end, because
You miss stuff.
yeah, hold those thoughts don't work so well at my age anymore. So the Herrick Drive, could I bring you back to the Herrick
of
Drive
course.
for a quick second?
Page up.
Now, the two outlined in red are wet.
Yep.
What about that whole other slice is not wet? but you're saying anyone, can build on the outlined in red 2 small parcels. So conceivably, we could build on that whole slice.
Not the green.
Not the green, how come?
It's conservation land.
Oh, but you want to build on the conservation land on the parkway.
I want to swap it out, correct.
Well, why don't you,
It's not
it does beg the question.
The
Why
point is,
not?
that is not large enough.
Well, it does beg the question. Because you said, well, it's conservation land.
Correct.
Okay. So isn't the parkway.
If,
So we have two places that are conservation land. You could swap out anything you want anywhere in town for those in the reds, and then just build on the whole thing.
The problem
same
is,
as
as
you don't
said,
have enough land in town to swap out that whole big space?
correct. So what you're looking at there, the item shown in blue is 1.1 acre. The item shown in yellow is 1.57 acres. Combined, they're about 2.7 acres. We need 6.
Okay, and what's in the blue?
The green?
Oh, the green, I'm sorry,
I don't know, but
because
it's-
I have
but
an angle here.
Yeah,
But shouldn't we know?
It's below 6 acres. As I mentioned.
The
Yep.
totality?
Correct. As I mentioned earlier in my
Below?
presentation, we looked at the available sites. We looked at ones like these that are next to each other and adjoined to see if we could combine them to make one larger site, and we can't. So I'll find the value, the size of that, and show you that it doesn't work for a 6-acre site.
Because of the wetlands.
Because the overall combination of the acreage of those 3 parcels is below the 6 acres.
Okay, 3 parcels is below. And it has nothing to do whether it's conservation or not, because we're all sitting here because of a conservation land
Correct.
issue.
Correct.
So I believe we should leave that part out of the argument. So the argument should be not enough space, not because it's conservation
No,
land.
we've honestly taken a look at everything. And if it fit and worked for the construction of the school, we would do it.
You would have
So
gone to Herrick Drive instead of the
If
Parkway?
it worked for a school, yes, but it didn't, so we didn't. The reality is, as I said, we've studied every available parcel in this town, probably better than a number of other committees within this town. And the best parcel for the school is the one on Gile Road.
And I see that, but the spin here is, we can't use that because, well, that big blue or green, whichever color it is conservation land. So I think, in my opinion, we have to be very careful how we describe why and why not we have chosen certain parcels of land. So now we're back to acreage.
But I think what Sean is trying to say is, if you look at that diagram right there,
Uh-huh.
if you wiped out the back all the way to that road, you color that green, I think Sean would be in here right now and saying, I want to build on Herrick Drive, because it would be big enough. You could build, he'd have a buildable lot, he'd have more than 6 acres. What he's saying right now is it's not big enough. So
All
even
those
look-
3 colors are
Yeah, it's
not
just
big
not
enough.
big enough. So
I
he's
mean,
like,
just by
not
s-
even looking at it.
Just by scale, if you look at the 2 that are there, like I'm saying, they're about 2 acres, 2.5 acres. And if you.
Total.
Yeah, and then if you look at the green that's there with it, the other way that comes in too, that comes into this, and I know this from talking to the Conservation Commission, you have a perennial stream that's right there that runs right through. The setbacks from there make these parcels even smaller.
I have another question
Sure.
with the green space. Does the town even own the space outside of the 2 red outlined areas? Because if they do, okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that was owned by the town.
So how did those 2 small, if,
They took them
how,
by.
they took them out of conservation, but the town still owns them? Who
So
owns the land?
The 2 parcels that.
Those 2 little red things.
Good. So the 2 little red things that are there were owned by a developer.
Right.
He failed to pay his taxes, and the town took it by non-payment of taxes. The fact that it abuts additional conservation land there is how we identified it to say, let's convert those to conservation land to create one larger piece of conservation land.
So the town owns the whole thing.
Yes.
That was easy.
Yep.
I wanted to be. Okay, thank you, thank you.
So essentially, it brings us back to, Gal Road that we're talking about here. The one thing to note, as the, opponents, when we were doing this, they called the state forester to go out, walk the site with them. I was not invited. However, the letter that was sent was interesting, because as I read it, you feel free to read the highlighted portion, but essentially, in short, what it says is, if this is the site that you need to develop, there is a way to develop this site and maintain the ecological value within the site. So what that did to me is I said, the guy's cell phone number's on there, I'm gonna call him, and I wanna go for a walk with him. So called the gentleman, he was happily met with me. Two of the opponents for this that went out on the original site reached out to me. I invited them to come out. I'm not trying to hide anything. And we walked the site. So as we walked the site, he basically created a heat map that looked a lot better in the PowerPoint than it does on my PDF, but good enough for now. Essentially what he did is he educated me. Again, I'm an engineer, I'm not a tree person, but what he educated me on is the ecological value of that site is located down by Blue Hills Parkway. And we walked in, we measured off roughly by his measurement about 300 feet in, which we're showing in red. So what he said is, if there's a way that you can save this portion of the site, you're maintaining 70 to 80% of the ecological value of that site. So for me, this entire time, this entire process that we've been doing, I've been reaching out to opponents. I've been offering, what is a compromise? What will make it work? And we really haven't heard much. This was one of the ones that was kind of thrown out there of, could we save this? So we looked at it. So that happened, that site walk I did was probably a month before town meeting last year. Town meeting going into it, we had our votes all lined up from every committee. We had the support. I fully expected to pass with the full land swap that we were doing before. But as I walked the site with them, I came up with a different idea. And for lack of a better word, threw a monkey wrench into our plans. But I think it worked better. And that's kind of what I want to present to you guys tonight and walk you through a little bit of how we changed what we were doing. The key point on this whole thing was we listened to our opposition, we listened to Home Inc., we listened to the people that, the conservationists, and we adjusted. I mean, we didn't just put our blinders on and keep going. Even with all the support that we had, we stopped. And this is taking a lot more time for what we're doing. So what we're doing right now is we've engaged BSC engineering group. They're going to do a survey right now of the existing wetlands that are out there. Essentially, the line you see in green that abuts Pine Tree Brook, and then two of the smaller wetlands that are on the sides there. Once we know what those are, they're going to design a redesigned Guile Road. And this is kind of the concept I came up with on the fly. Where Guile Road goes will be dependent on that wetland marker. So that's the first domino in the design. Once we get that, we've asked them to push it as far over as they can, and then also do a 50-foot offset more away from the brook again for the residents of Pine Tree Brook, so that at least there's a couple options.
Sorry, Sean.
Yep.
So you're redesigning the road to avoid the wetlands. That's what you're basically saying?
Correct. Yeah, what we're doing is the wetlands are a constraint. So wherever that boundary is on the left-hand side of the image, we're going to try to push the road over there. What it does there, what it does is open up this parcel that's here and where the road was. So this parcel is a parks parcel, very low ecological value from the state forester, and everyone was an opponent was always saying it wasn't worth a lot. So that's, as I went out there, I stood on the road and with the state forester, I was looking at him like, if I take this road and push it this way, like the engineer in me came out, if I push this road this way and then open up this and realign it, we can use part of this land. Now I get rid of Guile Road, which is that divider there, and now I can merge parts of the parcel. So what it does now is Once we define where that road's gonna go, it's gonna give us a portion of land there that we can now utilize.
So is Guile Road, sorry,
Go
so
ahead.
Guile Road comes in from Canton and then it goes out to Blue Hill. We're talking about the existing one that goes by,
Right.
so you're talking about pushing it to, like, if you're facing from Blue Hill Parkway, you're pushing it to the left?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm not very good, like, this is so
This
out
is
of my
the
realm.
existing road.
Yes, and so they're pushing it that way.
To the red.
Gotcha, okay, that makes sense.
Yep. So what happens now is by pushing Guile Road over there and doing that 300-foot setback off Blue Hills Parkway, what you see in green is what we can keep as conservation land. So by doing that, we maintain the ecological value of the site. We now create two parcels that are gonna merge, a smaller portion of the conservation land and another portion of the parkland. By merging them together, we create a different parcel for the site. The yellow colors that you see on the right-hand side of here are essentially setback lines that are gonna be there. So what we're doing is, based on how much that road moves over and how much that parcel is, which is unknown at this point right now, we're having them survey at 50-foot increments offsets from Home Inc. And we're doing that essentially to push the project further away. Part of our meetings with Home Inc., there was concerns of how close we were with them. So acknowledging that, we're doing our best to move it away. This whole thing, like I said, has been a lot of extra work responding to concerns and stuff that were out there.
So potentially you could move this, potentially, 200 feet back from the existing senior housing?
Good point. So not 200 feet, 150-foot maximum. The fourth one that you see there.
The teal color?
Yeah, the teal one that's there. What happened, the key thing to keep in mind with a building of this size, wherever the property line is, there's an automatic zoning 50-foot buffer that's built in, that you can't build anything within a 50-foot buffer. So what we're looking at from Home Inc. is the purple line that's up there, is a 150-foot setback maximum. And then we put the other one there, so that would be the 50-foot zoning buffer, essentially 200 feet away, but the property line would be at 150 feet. The other thing that comes in too is all of this that you're seeing up here is physically going to be marked out on the site. So there's gonna be flags out there that we can walk the site and see it. Most likely with Conservation Commission, there'll be another site walk. There was one before, I'm fully seeing there's one now. What I ask is, if you go on the site walk for the conservation, for this, also attend the school. Go in the schools, see what they're doing.
Excuse me, do you have a plan of how this will be laid out? Will this also address like sports, like facilities, for like soccer, basketball, for these kids that will be attending?
Yeah, so what previously, when we had the other site, we had DRA do a concept design for us. We're hoping with whatever available funding we have, they can do something similar. So what we're trying to do now is figure out what that parcel is gonna be, and then once we figure out that parcel, turn it over to the architects to lay it out. The nice thing with this site too, is you leverage the existing fields and stuff there, so the construction costs of the entire thing come down, because you're building a school that leverages existing fields that are already there. The other flip side that comes in too is the new fields that are being built at Lower Guile Road and stuff like that. We can address the parking issues that are there by putting the school there and by putting parking there. So like in the summertime when there's no school and you have all this free parking, now that they could park there and walk over to the field.
You said that we have fields there, but we're maxed out on these fields. We need more fields for these kids. If we have a growing population, the kids are at .32 for soccer because we don't have enough fields. So the question, because if we add more schooling, we're adding more kids, where are these facilities? They can't.
Quick clarification, we're not adding more kids, the kids are already here.
Well, you're trending, you
I'm with
said.
you, yep.
Yeah.
Part of the facility, there will be fields as part of it. It won't be a full baseball field or a soccer field or stuff like that. But the construction and that stuff, again, falls out of our scope. There's only so much we can do.
Yeah, no, it's just a little,
Yeah, you're familiar with Lower Guile Field, that they're going ahead with that construction right now.
yeah, correct, yep. It's still not enough.
Just to clarify the map, and everyone probably understands this, but as far as you go to those lines on the right, whether the yellow, the purple, the teal, that will all fill in as green and continue to be
Correct.
conservation land. So it's a little misleading because we haven't, but so you'll see all of that land from Home Inc. will continue to be conservation land.
Yeah.
Depending
So
on where that line lines are.
Existing greens are going to add greens, but the green we already see will never go anywhere.
The green that you see there is the base. Yeah, that's not going anywhere.
Which, could that lead me to a follow-up question? Let's just pretend all of this happens and there's land left in conservation. Some land becomes, well, it's already green. All of it's green right now, right? Okay, we have to stay, it's all green right now.
Yep.
You want to change its color. So, and all of this happens, and you've changed the color of some green, but there's still some green there. What are the safeguards that will be put in place by this town? Not any specific committee or person. What are the safeguards that someone won't ask the question, oh, I need a track and field. Oh, I know where we can get some because in 2001 we got a road, and in 2022 we got a school. So, bingo, let's go get that track and field, and we know where to go because there's some green left.
Yeah, I got a great answer for you.
Okay, good.
So, there'll be no land left to swap. So
In this whole entire town?
yeah, I mean, there's no land right now. So
Out of
there's-
those 107 parcels that the
We're-
town gave you to look at,
we're
not
split-
one of those pieces of land, not one,
This
can be made into conservation. It seems like there's a magic wand and you can do it. That's how it seems to me.
If it was a magic wand and I could wave it, I
I'm
would.
just telling you my point of view.
So, you know, I mean, one of my points I wanted to make tonight too is the reason this project is so important, or why we get it right. Because, the future proofing that you were talking about, once you build this school, there's no more land. You know what I mean? You're not gonna find another 6-acre parcel to build that school, so you gotta
But
get
you
it.
can find another acre or two to build a track and field.
I don't know. And again, that is beyond what my committee's charged with. I mean, if you want to go in theoretical for a lot of things, there's a lot of theoretical.
I think what I'm aiming at is because there has been some discord about this parcel coming out of conservation status.
Correct.
I think that's a good question to ask to satisfy those that really don't want to see this prime ecosystem of conservation land. Although the Herrick Drive has its own ecosystem too. It's just a wetland ecosystem as opposed to a forest ecosystem. I think it has to be made that you just can't undo that ever again.
Well,
Not one more inch.
the key to that comment,
Yes.
we heard that last time.
Oh, you did. I'm new to the Warrant Committee. I apologize.
No, that's fine. I'm not from you, but in general from the opponents, we did hear that. That's why we pulled everything back and redoing it. The ecological valuable part of that site, we're maintaining. So the part that you reference is possibly changing, isn't going to change. And that's not me coming up with that. That's an independent state forester from the state that determined that, not me. So as he mentioned that, I changed my entire design. We put ourselves on bypass for a year on this project. So my concern right now with the students of the town, my daughter who's going to be attending these schools, and we just put it on hold, on pause for a year to address that. So we are addressing the ecological values of the site, and we've done that through everything we're presenting tonight.
John,
Yep.
on the map, so where does the school actually go?
We don't know yet. My guess is gonna be right where the road is, in the center of the parcel.
The red road?
No, the existing road, I apologize. So existing Gal Road that's there. So, again, partly what we want to do, define the parcel, get the swap done, and then as we define what the parcel is, work with people that are abutters. You know, we have been in touch with Home Inc. I know they're here tonight. I've said to them multiple times, you can have a seat at the table as we start designing this project to address any concerns that you have. You know, we want their input, we've responded to their input, and again, have changed everything that we're doing. You know, I mean, this is a lot of extra work where, in my mind, we're already set to go last May. So until we engage an architect, we don't know those. Essentially, it's a blank slate for us right now, and we're looking for input for people for, you know, where they would like to see things and where they would not like to see things. Outside of which they don't want it on this parcel, you know, our intent is, I mean, our committee has worked, as I talked about, for 3 years, not just me, 9 other people in the town, volunteering their time to sift through every available parcel, to identify this one, and work for the past 1.5 years to develop this. So,
Can you just tell us where Home Inc. is exactly on this?
yeah, it's not shown, mainly because the clipping the image did that, but essentially on the right side, where the north arrow is right here, essentially you can see portions of the house that are right here. So I did meet with Home Inc. We did a Q&A with them last year, right before town meeting. I stood in front of them taking non-prepared questions for 3 hours and answered everything. I did not shy away from any question. If there was something I didn't know, I openly said that. And I walked the site back there with the abutters, and you know, they asked me, you know, how can you build the school 50 feet from our house? The intent wasn't to build it 50 feet exactly, but we listened to those concerns, and that's what made me go with all these different options and try to think of something. I'm trying to make everybody happy, but the true point of compromise, not everyone's gonna be happy. I'm not happy I'm delayed. You know, Home Inc. isn't gonna be happy if the thing goes in there. I'm sure the conservationists aren't gonna be happy, but if everyone's just a little bit not happy, that's essentially what a compromise would be.
I hate to keep going back here, but something's not settled for me. So, 6 acres. In our whole town, you could only find 3 of these parcels to make 6 acres.
2.
Well, 2, yes, because you're like taking 2 little things and making it 1.
Nope, the only...
The little red ones down at the Herrick Drive.
Nope. The only 2 parcels that we looked at potentially for the construction of the school was the one at Randolph Ave, which was over 6 acres, and this one.
Okay.
Over 6 acres.
Okay, so Randolph Ave, you're making a bigger wedge of land by taking the piece in the middle.
Correct.
And down on Herrick Drive, there were 2 red outlines, so you're taking 2 littles to make...
It was less than 6 acres,
Oh,
much
that's what I'm
less.
saying.
like
I know,
4.
but you're taking 2 littles to make it 1, even though you're saying you... Because every time I read it, it says, we're giving you 3 parcels of land, and even on that chart, I don't know if you still have it, on Herrick Drive, you've got red here, and then another red here. It's not 1 big red, you've got 2 reds. So if that's 2 reds that you're making into 1, now you're saying there's 2 parcels. So in our whole town, and I know I keep asking this because I've lived here so long and I don't know this answer at all until
What I'd ask...
now.
Yeah,
Is
I was-
how,
I was-
in our whole big town, we
I
have
agree.
not one other piece of anything to make conservation land, is what my question is.
Oh, to make additional conservation land?
Right, so you,
That's a different question.
well, it's somewhat and somewhat not, because I really feel as though I heard that there's no more conservation land to be had anywhere.
The...
So this was it. This is it. In our
Let me-
whole big wide
let me-
border
no, no, no,
town,
hold on,
there's
hold on.
not going to be even a driveway we can make into conservation land.
If I may,
Yes, please, because I'm not,
no problem. So
Processing this correctly.
it's totally fine. So originally, your thought process was talking about construction of the school, are there additional parcels? And what I can tell you with certainty, there isn't. A 6-acre parcel. If there was a 6-acre parcel that we could develop, I would do it. We would abandon everything that we're talking about tonight, and we would do it. It does not exist. And I can confidently say that.
I usually don't rewatch a meeting that I'm in, but I'm going to have to rewatch this one.
No, that's fine.
Because I could have, I really believe that I did hear you say, nothing else can ever be swapped out for conservation.
No,
So,
what I was getting at there is when you were talking about the remaining land that's here, in the future, if it was to get swapped out, to do that swap out, there's really not enough.
you will never be able to find land in the town of Milton.
My guess is probably not, because
And
you have to
just
swap
go,
it, you have to swap it at a different
conservation.
ratio. You'd have to swap it at a higher ratio. So every acre of land that you take, you have to convert 2 to 3 acres, probably more, for that. That ratio that's there, that we're working with the Executive Office, Energy and Environmental Affairs, they brought that ratio is, not a published ratio, a hard number. If we're building a school and we're land-struck and we don't have a lot of land, they'll play with that number a little bit for us.
Okay.
If I may get to the next slide, we'll
Sorry?
walk it through.
And we're starting to close in on 9.
Yeah, I'm wrapping up now.
I should leave, so no more questions, Dave.
So the previous land swap, when we were doing it, and I pulled out the park parcel that was on there because we're working on that now, just strictly talking conservation land. The parcel for Guile Road, the land parcel that we're talking about is about 6.8 acres. We're gonna use less than that. So that side of the equation is going down. The other side of the equation, as it stands right now, we have 8.87 acres. That is also gonna go up. We're working with the town to identify additional parcels to convert to conservation land. So what we're trying to do here is use less of the ecological valuable site and provide more conservation land as part of the swap. So, as we develop further along, you'll see additional parcels on that right side to kind of skew the equation.
So there is more land that you can make conservation land. So the land that's going to become, that's green, not going to become green, but going to have some little green, and you're saying will always stay green because you'll never be able to find any more land. Now you just said we can, most likely.
Something like that.
Something like that. So see, it's the spin, how you spin.
I am not spinning a thing.
Okay, it's how you perceive something is being spun.
If I may, I think what Sean was talking about was if all of that land, if there is a land swap and all of that existing conservation land, or all of that existing land goes into conservation land, then there won't be that much. There'll be very little to swap in the future. That's, I think, what he was referring to. If that's done now, with those additional parcels.
Okay, so if you needed to take an acre from the newly invented green, that was already green, you could have the teal line, the purple line, the yellow line. It'll never happen that you'll want to build a track and field down there because you have no land to swap out, but here you are saying you do. See, there's some confusion over this, and my main question will always remain the same. What is the safeguard? And I'm not hearing it. I'm sorry, I'm not.
And that is beyond the scope of the school building committee. That is a town, I would ask you to ask that to the select board and look at them for that. For me, I'm trying to secure land to build a school. That's it. And as I've stated multiple times, we've worked for this for the better half of 3 years.
That's why you have a select board
I think
member.
that we're gonna have to accept that answer as the
Okay,
answer
we'll accept that.
for
We'll
this
go at it
presentation.
later.
And I can just say,
It's fine.
the safeguard is the residents of the town. Ultimately, that's the safeguard.
Yeah. So, closing slides, essentially, everything we're doing now, all this additional work is additional time. We're surveying the wetlands. I'm meeting with the select board tomorrow night to execute the contract for that. It depletes us of all our funding. I'm very proud to say over 3 years that we've been going, we were allocated $40,000 at the beginning, and we've stretched it the whole way. That video that you saw, we made it ourselves. We're surveying the boundaries of the parcels. There's gonna be a number of parcels that we have to do. We're redesigning Gow Road. If we have funds left over, because the contract might have funding left over, we're gonna do a conceptual design of the school. And then after we get all that stuff, and as a committee, we vote on what we're doing, then we have to run the gauntlet of meetings again. We're coming back to you guys with our presentation. We're asking for your support. We're going to select board. We're going to the Parks Department, everyone. And then finally, the results of all this additional work, we're using less conservation land. So as part of our project, we've reduced that number down. We're allowing the ecologically valuable portion of that site to remain. The ratio of conservation land will increase. Previously, it was 2 to 1. We're hoping to bump that number up higher. And then lastly, the project will move further from Home Inc. Previously, we were on the boundaries with Home Inc. Based on the survey work that we get, again, how far we can push Gow Road over and how much of that extra land we can do, we'll adjust to move it further away. And then last slide was questions, but feel free to keep them.
Can I add something?
Yes.
So the land we're looking at, so it's costing us time, it's costing us effort, it's costing us, we're gonna have to move a road, but cash that we're paying for the land, is that zero?
Zero.
Okay. If we were, you talked earlier about looking at other private properties, thinking about it itself, diocese, whatever, do we have a ballpark of how much land would have cost if we had bought 6 acres?
The mechanism for that, I've always wondered, like even when we issued an RFP, if we got responses, it was like, do we have funding to buy land, which we didn't. So even now, if a parcel became available, there's a process to get appropriations done on that. My guess is probably $5 to $6 million for the size of land that we would need from a private entity.
Okay.
And then we'd have to go to town meeting and ask for $5 to $6 million, hoping the person that's gonna sell it to us will wait around while we go through that whole process to get a check, to bring it back to them to close. We all know that won't happen.
Okay. So by building on town-owned land, whether it's here or elsewhere, we're saving $5 to $6 million.
Approximately.
Okay.
Yep. I'm always nervous to talk numbers, because
Sure.
with construction, if anyone understands construction over the past couple of years, everything has gone way up. So even by sitting on this project and waiting for it for a year, it has cost us money. The longer we wait for it, the more expensive it's going to be.
Sean?
Yes, sir.
That was my argument as to why I was disappointed you didn't come with a vote last year, to be honest, because we knew everything was going up. We see where we are. The bonding rates are not gonna be the same, everything's gonna be up. And so, I was very frustrated, and I'm sure, by that wait, because of cost, thinking about it, because I knew this would be a harder process simply because of that. Seeing what you've said, your ask here and is for us to all be a little bit unhappy, which I think it's a very, very difficult ask, right? Because you have if you're against moving roads, if you're against ecology, if you're against schools. I mean, Home Inc. are the people who literally, in this town, we push everything away from our houses. They're the ones who are saying, okay, they're working with this, and we appreciate their sacrifice in all this. My question is, we've sat here and listened to this for 3 hours, or 15 people, right, or 2 hours now, and how do you plan to get this through the town, considering all the different wrinkles? Do you have a plan as to how to limit some of the confusion? You've knocked out this ecological part. Can we find a way to tie that down so we don't keep, there's a lot of wind sails that can catch wind and sail this different places. Is there a way in which we can streamline? This is a wonderful presentation. I commend you, I commend your work. This is absolutely tremendous work. But I think when you're trying to make everyone happy, I'm just struggling to see how you get this ball over the line of this town.
Yeah.
So the adjunct to everyone being a little unhappy is everyone being a little happy, right? So the effort here is to try to address the concerns of all involved as best we can. And I think if with this plan, if we can appeal to residents' better nature and to their reason and their reasonable view of things, then our hope is that we can get some consensus here. It's not going to be a full consensus. There are always going to be people opposed to anything you do, right? Particularly when you try to change something, Nobody likes change. And that's the lesson number one that I've learned in the last few years, is that nobody likes change. But if we can do our best to address all the concerns of those involved and all the residents, our hope is that we can get some kind of consensus to move forward here. And we think that was that was, I think it's fair to say, from our committee's view, that was the reason to try again, to try harder, to try to get something that will make everyone a little happy, as opposed to having different groups opposed to things. If we could try to make things a little bit better for all of these different interests, then hopefully we can move forward. So that was the effort, and we'll see how successful we are.
Concretely, would you add to this last slide, the results of additional work, the last slide, the cost offsets that you're making in terms of, sure, things are more expensive, but you're saving money being on the site of the school? Can you make also the fiscal case? Because I think putting that site job will save us money, and that's missing from your presentation.
Yeah, and that's part of it. You know, tonight's presentation was to tackle a lot of stuff. You know, I mean, we're trying to educate new members of the committee for stuff that they might not be aware of from last time. And as the chair mentioned, you know, we're having additional meetings after this. I'll come to as many meetings as you want me to come to. I will answer as many questions as you need me to. So
can I piggyback onto that? Sure. This was a lot of information. I mean, I've been following it, so a lot of it, you know, I know about the arguments for needing a new school, and I guess my question is this a multi-tiered question? Is it, do we need a new school? If we need a new school, do we need to build it? And if we need to build it, are we doing this land? Like, are we asking people to say yes, yes, yes? Does that make sense? Like, it's like, or is there already an understanding that our town is at capacity school-wise? We've explored every opportunity to build on, and we've heard that that's not an option. So from there, like, is there a level of giving? Does that make sense?
Right.
So I think the way that we've looked at it is that this committee's view, the school building committee's view, and the facility subcommittee's view is that we need to build a building, right? The town may not agree, right? But the first step, before you even get close to whether you need a building, how you build a building,
We had that set for you. That was
Before
awesome.
you even get to the point of how you build a building, you need the land. Because otherwise you're wasting a lot of cycles and a lot of money determining what the building is. So you first need to secure the land, right? So I think our committee's view is secure the land and then go down and spend the time and spend the money on what the building will be, how much it will cost, and go to the residents and say, okay, we have the land, we have the building, do you want to build it? And if you don't, then the land goes back into conservation.
I guess then that question, I don't know how to put that. That makes it a very different presentation.
That's right.
In the sense of, this is a lot of information, which I think is needed. I don't know, I guess my question is, at what level, where is this amount of information needed? Because if the question that we're putting out there is, this is a bigger discussion about the need for school, et cetera. All we need to discuss now is, if we're moving forward with it, we need 6 acres of land and this is what we're doing. And I think it's easy to get caught up in all of the details, which I think are important, but who are they important to, I guess, is the question.
So,
If
I
that's
think that's a good place to bring it home,
Yeah.
insofar as, with regards to this presentation, it sounds to me like we've kind of gone through the questions at this point. The way it's going to present itself to us at the Warrant Committee is going to be in the context of the land swap. Now, I asked the school building committee to come and put its best foot forward with regards to the overall, because we need to know what we're talking about.
Gotcha.
But I think that, you know, I ultimately are going to ask the committee, now everything happens in a larger context, I ultimately am going to ask the committee when we weigh the conversation about the land swap to focus on the land swap. There's a lot that we haven't heard about the land swap. Because I think that, you know, what I had asked Mr. O'Rourke to do is come and put his best foot forward with regards to what we were talking about here. And so, I think ultimately where we are going to come together when we start talking about, right now, the first time that this could happen would be at the special town meeting coming up in December, would be in an article that would be about land swap. The article will not be allocate X, Y, Z dollars for a school, X, Y, all of that is down the road, okay? So,
Very helpful.
I think what we're gonna try to do is bring it back to that.
I do have a question, Chair, about that, to your point. When you say we vote on it, we are giving them the rights to then go back to the town and say, this is what I'm gonna do with the land. But I think the challenge will be is we're giving them the right to own, have that land for whatever period of time, they were saying like 5-10 years. And that will be something I think you have to, when you're voting, or will have, because we obviously know what the use of it will be for.
We only give a recommendation to the town.
Yeah.
We don't,
No, yeah.
we don't have any voting
But-
authority.
Well, okay.
And it'll be on a specific article. When we vote on the
Yeah.
article will be, are we in favor or not
In favor,
of
okay.
a land swap?
Swap, okay.
If I just may add, the way I view this, and I think the committee views this, is you'll be voting on whether we continue our work.
Yeah,
Because if you
Okay, that's a good way of
vote
putting it.
against a land swap, we're done.
yeah, okay, that's,
So, well,
Right.
in my view,
that helps.
Your last word.
Very, very quickly. So, yeah, thank you again. I appreciate being in person. I hate Zoom. This is a lot
Yeah.
better for me. Sorry about that. I tend to mumble sometimes, so if I ever do, just yell. Yeah. The upcoming presentations that we'll be doing will be focused on the land swap. There's legal issues that are out there right now that we're reviewing. Town council is working with us on these things. The thing to keep in mind is, we've been working with town council hand in hand since we came up with this. So this is not something our committee's kind of gone off on our own. And we're following 100% the advice of town council. If he told us to abandon, not to do this, we would.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just a quick question, that 38-page document you sent to us from the law firm, I don't remember what the law firm was.
Yes.
That was, that law firm was hired by the people that live next door? Homemaker.
Yes, and I'm sure that there will be discussion with regards to that at some point. You know, for purposes of this meeting and this agenda, we put on their presentation.
Okay.
So I'm sure that there will be more input from others, from the public, from interested parties and stakeholders.
Probably town council.
I think we should hear something, yes. Okay, new business. Mr. Doyle. Thank you for coming. Would it be possible, as far as our new business goes, for you to give us some insight into things that you think we might be looking at as a special, and then on at the, potentially even the annual town meeting? And I'm sorry, I probably should have asked you to speak first.
It's all right, that's your pleasure, decision.
You know, to be able to get you out of here. I'm sure that it's a long day.
I don't know if I want to go up there.
Thank you.
May I invite our new town administrator, Nicholas Milano, to accompany?
Please.
Good evening.
Hey, we haven't met. I'm Dave Humphreys. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for coming to the committee.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Meet you, wow.
Good to see you all.
Nice to meet you.
It's a pleasure for us to be with you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm looking forward to our working together and what is probably going to be a very, very important year for the town of Milton, financially and otherwise. Nick has joined us within the last couple of weeks as our new town administrator. I'd like to give him an opportunity to say a few words, if that would be all right with you,
Yes,
Mr.
please,
Chairman,
thank
after introducing a little bit of his background, if you haven't had an opportunity to see it. Nick previously served as the Assistant Town Administrator in Medfield, Massachusetts. He was previously also Senior Policy Analyst for the Boston Municipal Research Bureau. He was an Executive Aide to the Mayor of Marlborough, Massachusetts, a Project Coordinator for the Massachusetts School Building Committee, vis-a-vis the last topic, conversation, and a Legislative Aide in Massachusetts. He earned his Bachelor of Arts cum laude from the Commonwealth Honors College at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and holds a Master of Urban Affairs degree from Boston University. He also earned a certificate in local government management and leadership sponsored by the Massachusetts Municipal Association and Suffolk University. He's tired of me saying I wanted to share this background so that everybody was on the same plateau. Thank you.
Thank you. Never gets strange enough to listen to that. So, appreciate the time. As Mr. Doyle mentioned, I've worked in both a city form of government and a town form of government. Medfield faced many of the same challenges Milton faces, you know, great school system, but limits on property tax and revenue and how to balance those interests. Happy to have navigated a tricky budget situation there for the past few years. Eager to get my hands dirty involved in the budget here in Milton, as well as all the other issues that we have to work on. We had a great close working relationship with the Warrant Committee in Medfield. It was a very similar setup. It was a Warrant Committee, so same kind of setup as here in Milton. So look forward to working with all of you. My door is always open. Feel free to stop by anytime you're in Town Hall. Happy to chat, catch up, talk business, not talk business. So please, I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Welcome.
We also want to thank you for what you are doing in service to the town of Milton. You know that many of you are new members to the Warrant Committee. So it's a learning process, a mutual learning process in some respect, because a matter of degree for some than others. You had asked Mr. Chairman about some of the topics for the upcoming town meetings, the special town meeting in December, and then of course the annual town meeting in May. A little further out, harder to predict right now. But we have some placeholders that we'd like to share with you. And what we'd like to do following this is to probably get to you a brief paragraph on each of the placeholders, recognizing that this is a little bit of a floating situation at the present time. One is likely to be in the area of town finances. Maybe you know that we have lost our town director of finance. She returned to a former employer about 3 months ago. It's very difficult to obtain somebody with that type of skills background in this particular municipal market. Part of the issue is the fact that a whole new generation of people in this career were not developed and trained. So there's a very, very keen competition among communities for a director of finance. Nick can probably speak more to this. We have also, as a placeholder, and this is in discussion with Meredith Hall, the chair of our planning board, codification of the bylaws. They have it on their agenda for their meeting of this week, and we'll have more information, of course, following that. There is a matter of the access road to what would be the old town dump from when I was a youngster. As we go up Chickatawbut Road and go in there and do a little bit of exploring, sometimes the mining. We have a construction that was referenced earlier at, I think, 628 Randolph Avenue. And then, of course, we have just ahead of that, or on back of it, the proposed animal shelter to be considered. Our town planner and director of community development, Tim Zawinski, is working on that. So we will have more information for you in the not too distant future. There is a public interest group in a sustainable Milton. They have been working very hard and are looking at the possibility of proposing an article. They'll be coming before the select board tomorrow night, based upon information that arrived today, and I have not yet had a chance to review it, but Nick and I spoke about it very, very briefly. It seems as if they are looking to establish a committee. We don't know that that necessarily warrants, pun intended, going to the warrant committee into town meeting. We have to flesh out some things with them, of course. We also have had a discussion involving a resident who is proposing that town meeting motions be allowed to move the previous question. This is something that you probably heard come up on the floor of the town meeting during the last couple of town meetings in particular. That discussion in the prior select board meeting involved the proponent and the town moderator. It is on our agenda for tomorrow night, and the select board will make a decision at that time as to whether or not it thinks it should move forward in supporting that. We don't know, again, what the timing of that might be, whether that's for December or it may be beyond December. We also have in Milton an Historic District Committee. This is different, distinct from the Milton Historic Commission. The Historic District Committee has, under state law, the responsibility of identifying districts within the community that would be identified and certified as historic per se. The chair of that committee addressed us at our last meeting and has indicated that there is need for an extension of time on the part of that committee. I suspect they will probably be coming to us more for the annual town meeting in May than for the December town meeting. Yes, sir.
Who's chairman on that committee?
Went right through my mind. I apologize to him as well as to you. Larry, last name is escaping me, but I will, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'll remember. I'll give you a call, how's that? I think that tips most of them. Nick, did I miss anything, or do you have comments that you would like to add?
Nope, the only one is obviously the school project that we just heard from. That is a potential for, that we've been tracking and following as everybody, so.
Do you have any questions for us?
Without Karen here and without that role being filled, you know, we're also down a warrant committee clerk and trying to hire and Nick coming up to speed. Do we expect any difference in the process going into this December town meeting? You seem pretty quick up to speed, I expected, but how are we gonna be able to fill in things? What would be different from us? Because Karen was a key part of, I think, getting things ready and, you know, giving us the numbers. I mean, personally, she delivered numbers into all our hands, so how are we looking to move forward?
No, it's a good question. It's nice to have more people than less, certainly. But we are, trying to check off everything to keep things moving. We're finalizing some communications to start the capital planning process off. I've already been working on some of the long-term projections and going through the numbers myself because, while I can see it and flip through a budget, it's helpful to kind of get right in there just to kind of get a feel for what the budget looks like year over year in Milton. That's what I've been focused on myself the last few weeks. And then I've been engaged with department heads already, talking about what's going on in their departments, what does the past history look like, what does the next few years look like. So in terms of big picture conversations, those have already begun. Obviously, checking everything, making sure everything's right will take a whole team of us, but Anne Marie Fagan, who has tons of knowledge to share with everybody, is still on board and helping me out in this time. So I've been able to benefit from that, and we have advertised the finance director position again. We did another push when I started a couple weeks ago. So just keeping our ears out there, see if anybody's interested. I'm speaking at a group at the end of this month for the next generation of municipal managers, and it's another opportunity to share that our job is out there and open. So it's one of the things that I believe in is that we need to get people attracted to this field, and municipal managers were going through a wave of retirements. They did a good job of people in my kind of job, but not so much those other financial jobs that are really attractive positions if people give them a shot and learn it. You just have to get in the door and grow and build. So long story short, yes, we have a lot of work to do. We understand that. I've been trying to get started since day one so that we don't have any issues and getting everything we need to have a very cohesive budget process this year.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Oh, to
Jay?
follow up on that, I'm just a little concerned about the timing, because as you know, the pension expense is near and dear to my heart, and that gets set in stone before January. And so I've been trying to reach out to people, understand the pension expense, understand the healthcare cost. And without a finance director, it's hard to know who to ask or get answers. And I'm worried that I'll look up a few months from now and, those will be set in stone and the warrant committee won't be able to do anything about it.
No, so my door is open. If you have questions about that stuff, in the meantime, please send them my way. Happy to help. I led the budget planning process the last 3 years in Medfield, so that's in my bailiwick. We had a town accountant, of course, but developing the budget and carrying those budgets from start to finish was my job. So while there is a finance director here, and we'd want that person to take on that role, in the meantime, that's what I'm here for. So feel free to come my way, knock on my door, shoot me an email, give me a call. Happy to chat, happy to provide the information you're looking for.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add that the Select Board will be having its annual retreat next month, and we'll be looking very seriously at what type of financial planning the Select Board thinks needs to be recommended for the out years, minimally a 3-year time horizon, possibly up to 5. The further it gets out, the softer it becomes, but 3 is pretty hard to work with. We're very fortunate in that we've had a sufficient amount of ARPA money, American Rescue Plan Act funding, for the town of Milton this past year. Without it, I would suggest that we would be in not the healthiest of financial straits. So there's going to be a gap to be covered because that money will not continue beyond 2024. So it's going to require that we really take a very, very serious look about what it is that the town needs in order to do what a town that's situated like Milton needs, rather than paring to the bone. I think from my position as chair of the Select Board, having sat on it 2.5 years now, we're pretty lean. And in order to do the type of work that this town is going to require, positioned as it is, with a global municipality to one side of us and a developing municipality to the south of us, that's going to be going gangbusters in the not-too-distant future, we're going to have to be taking a look at how it is that we're positioned, the resources that we're going to need, what the impacts of those two communities in particular might be upon us.
Sorry, which 2 communities?
That would be Quincy, to the south of us. So just a couple of thoughts in terms of things that we may be seeing for the future.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
Thank you.
Welcome.
Have a great evening, and again, thank you for your service.
Thank you. Is there any other matters that we need to address? I don't think so. The one administrative matter that we could bring up is that we are trying to fill our warrant committee clerk position. We did one interview. The candidate decided not to take the offer. So it was reposted and it's back up. If anybody knows anybody who might be interested, it's still there. If there's no other business to attend to, I adjourn. Thank you.
Oh, you need a motion.
Oh, yeah. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Seconded? Seconded. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.